Hey guys, this is Matthew, and I wanted to record this video for digital media or digital art for quiz one, just for some clarification and to help you along your journey. Um, so the first question, what does the rectangle tool do? Furthermore, how are the handles helpful after drawing a shape? And so if I come over here and select the rectangle tool, I've already got a red fill selected. I'm going to go ahead and give that stroke a parameter. I'm going to say I'm going to use this green just for fun, and I'm going to bump up the stroke size from 1 point to 3 points, just so that we can kind of see things. All I have to do is just drag with the shape tool selected, and I can make a shape. If I hit V on my keyboard, that's the shortcut to the black arrow tool, and then I can click away and deselect. If I want to reselect that object, I can do so with the black arrow tool. And when I do that, these little handles show up, which is pretty useful. And so the question is asking, again, what does the rectangle tool do? We figured that out. We selected the rectangle tool and we made a shape. You can also, by the way, make a perfect circle if you hold Shift, right? Okay. What does the rectangle tool do? And furthermore, how are the handles helpful after drawing a shape? Okay. And so again, if I have the black arrow tool selected, I can select or engage this object by simply clicking. And then there are these little handles that are visible on each side. And so you can modify the shape of that rectangle by simply dragging those handles. Additionally, you can actually grab the corner of an object or square or rectangle, and you can make some modifications. Okay. Next question. Describe the difference. Highlight this so that you guys can see it. Describe the difference between RGB and CMYK. Furthermore, what is the difference between pixels and vectors? This is really important foundational information to know as far as design and graphic design. But RGB stands for red, green, and blue. CMYK stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and K, which is key or is also black. Okay, so cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, essentially. RGB, if you're looking at an image on your phone or a television, those images are rendered in the RGB color system. If you're sending a file, a photograph, or a design graphic to be printed on an Epson printer, the color space CMYK is going to be used. So for example, if you go to Target or Hobby Lobby, or if you go to B&H Photo to pick up some Epson ink for your printer, you're never going to be buying red, green, and blue for a printer. You're always going to be buying CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. Okay? So just kind of keep that in mind. RGB is how devices in general render color. CMYK is how a printer renders color. Second part of the question, furthermore, what is the difference between pixels and vectors? Okay. So if I zoom in to this image, that's a vector graphic. You can see how perfect, and when I zoom in, it remains to be a perfect graphic, okay? The difference is if you take a photo with your phone or if you scan a photo, right, with a scanner, and then you bring that into Photoshop or Illustrator or pretty much any kind of Adobe editing application, you're going to be able to zoom into that object or that photograph, and you're going to see that that object or photograph is pixel based. So there are all these little tiny little pixels that create that image. Okay, so that's the general difference between vector and pixel or rasterized graphics. Sometimes you'll hear the word raster, which basically, I mean, sometimes you'll even see that question, from an Adobe software application. Do you want to rasterize this object? And essentially what it's asking is, do you want to make this object pixelated. So yeah. Next question. What is a stroke and what is a fill? Okay, well, we can sort of answer this question by looking at this object that we just created. A fill, Illustrator is object-based, and when you create an object, the object, for the most part, but this is not an absolute statement, but for the most part, it is always going to have a fill, and it is always going to have a stroke, okay? In this circumstance, the fill is red, and the stroke is green, okay? You can change those parameters by simply clicking on the object and then coming up here. This is where you can change the fill color. I can change that fill color to dark blue. And then I would like to change the stroke to magenta. All right. So fill, stroke. All right. The other thing that I would just like to mention is that an object does not always have to have a fill and stroke. You can select the object and then you can come up here and come over here to the red, sort of like this diagonal red line running through the square. That means none will be selected, or alpha channel or transparent will be selected. You can do the same thing for the stroke. And so the object does not disappear. It just does not have any color assigned to it. All right, that's kind of handy to know. Next question. How and why are layers valuable to process? Boy, I mean, this is really an important one, guys, because one of my friends and mentors once stated that, Illustrator is pretty simple. It's basically just a whole lot of the pen tool and a whole lot of layer management. And so right now, this document only has one layer, and we have not really done anything, beyond that. We haven't added or subtracted any layers, but I can come in here and I can rename this layer. I'm going to call it 1. Then I can come down here to the plus sign and create a new layer. When I create a new layer, it does not have a name associated with it, so you have to double click in and call it something. I'm going to call that layer 2. Pretty simple, okay? When I select an object, I can see which layer it's on. So for example, this object, it has this sort of blue diagrammatic color associated with it because it's on this layer. I know that this object is on the layer called 1. Why? Because there's this beautiful little icon that shows up when it's selected. Watch what happens when I deselect from the object. The little icon disappeared. And so if I drag and select again, now that little icon is back. So that's pretty handy as well, if you ask me. I'm going to give this object some color so that we can see it. And then I'm going to create another object, but on a separate layer. So all I have to do is highlight layer number 2. Go back to the shape tool. I'm going to create a circle, a perfect circle. I do not want it to be green. I want it to be magenta, and I also want it to have a stroke so that we can see it clearly. So layer number 2 is currently on top of layer number 1. Okay, and by the way, same thing that we just talked about. If you select an object, you'll see that this little icon is popping up, and instead of blue, it's red. Because not all the layers are going to have the same color. They're going to have different diagrammatic tones or colors so that you can sort of differentiate and essentially kind of ground yourself and navigate the document. All of these things, it's pretty intuitive and well designed by the Adobe folks. That being said, what if I want this object to be behind that green rectangle or box? Well, all I have to do is drag this layer down, and don't drag it so that it's going to be inside of layer number 1. Grab it and move it so that it will be below layer number 1 with that nice line that's happening there. So after you see that nice line, simply let go of your mouse. Okay, I can also make layers go away. So I can make that green box appear and disappear with the eyeball. I could also lock layer number 1. Okay, and the green box is currently on layer number 1. Notice how I can no longer move the box with the black arrow tool. On layer number 2 is the magenta circle. And I can make that go away and come back with the eyeball tool. And it is currently unlocked. So that means that I can still move the circle. And so this goes back to layer management and really kind of having control of your document when you're working, okay? Very, very important stuff. Like all of those details that I just kind of ran through, that is business that will become second nature to you, but at the get-go of this class, layer management is extraordinarily important that you understand, okay? So let's go back to the quiz. We just talked about question 4, how and why are layers valuable to process? Okay, so the next question is a pretty easy one if you ask me. What is an artboard? Okay, well, I mean, all of the objects, I just zoomed out by the way, all of the objects that are sitting on this canvas, in Illustrator, they call it an artboard. I guess if you're a painter, you would call it a canvas. So, you know, tomato, tomato, but essentially an artboard is where your document begins and ends. You can edit an artboard by coming over here. There's an artboard tool that you can engage. Once you do that, the artboard will highlight, and what you can do is you can come up here and change the dimensions or parameters. Currently, the artboard is 10 by 10 inches, but what if we wanted it to be 8 by 8 inches? And then you hit enter. Okay, we still have a square. We just made it a little bit smaller. Okay, good. Now let's go back to our laundry list here. What does the black arrow tool? We've been using the black arrow tool quite a bit, and essentially the black arrow tool, I mean, the technical name for it is the selection tool. I call it the black arrow tool. Mostly, I guess maybe that's just how I learned about Illustrator, and intuitively I just call it the black arrow tool. But it's called the selection tool, so you're able to select things, quote unquote. And so if I unlock my layers, I can select objects and I can move them around, right? And I can also I can select objects, but I can also deselect, which is very, very important. How do you deselect? Well, you just click into nothing. So I can click into the artboard and deselect as long as there's nothing there. Additionally, I can click into the ether or the gray area on the side and deselect. Sometimes there's this process of selecting and deselecting and selecting and deselecting because Illustrator is very object-based. And so you're constantly doing this back and forth. The shortcut for the black arrow tool, I think it's really important to note. And if you ever forget what the shortcut is, if you just put your cursor over the tool or any other tool, it'll remind you what the shortcut is. The shortcut for the black arrow tool is V, okay? And so let's say I've got a different tool selected, but for whatever reason, I want to go back to the black arrow tool without going all the way over here to the, I know it might seem kind of silly, you know, going back and forth, but it can really provide a nice user experience with the software if you're using your left and your right hands to switch between these tools. And so on the keyboard, you can hit V for black arrow tool, and it'll just pop up. And then if I want to go back to the pen tool, I would hit P. Okay, so, you know, just food for thought, right? We're trying to make this a seamless experience so that you can work smarter, not harder. What does the white arrow tool and how is it different compared to the black arrow tool? And so let's go ahead and hit A. That's the quick keyboard, you know, letter to hit if you want to select the white arrow tool. Once you do that, it's called the direct selection tool. So there's the selection tool and then the direct selection tool. Let's say we are looking at this rectangle. Let's zoom in a little bit so that we can see things properly. We're looking at this rectangle tool and we've selected it with the black arrow tool or the selection tool. Well, midway, we can actually switch to the white arrow tool or the direct selection tool. And you'll see that the handles are no longer here. And what you can do now is you can see these anchor points and you can double click into these anchor points and drag them around and make some changes. And so the white arrow tool, you're able to select things, but you're essentially, from, in my opinion, the best way to explain it is you're able to select things in much greater detail. And you really don't know exactly how, you don't know all the answers to all of these questions, but you really learn the value of the white arrow tool through experience. That's the best way I can sort of lead you on as far as why this tool is very, very valuable. Aside from just simply being able to select anchor points and move them around, which is great. The other thing I like to mention is that, I feel like the white arrow tool is kind of like deep tissue massage. Again, you're kind of just getting into greater detail with these objects to make changes. Okay. Oops. Question number 8. Why is the align panel so useful? Okay. Well, yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a perfect circle. I'm going to give it a different color. I'm going to make it orange with 0 stroke. You can see there's the alpha channel or the transparency there. And let's say I want to make 2, 3, 4, 5 circles. There's 2. Command C, Command V to duplicate, make a couple more. And just for, I don't know, just for ease, let's say we want 6. So what I can do is I can, with the align tool engaged, and basically how you find the align tool is you come up here to window and check align. Mine's already sitting here, so it's no problem. And then with the black arrow tool, I'm going to select all, I'm going to drag and select all 6 of those objects. And then I'm going to align to the artboard first. So I'm going to click trying to make there we go. Horizontal align center is what I just clicked to make them all come together like that. Now I'm going to hit Command Z for undo. And what if I hit vertical align center? That's really nice. That's useful. Gotta move this so I can see properly. There we go. Or what if I just want to align to the selection? And so instead of it aligning to the artboard, it's going to essentially kind of put all these in line according to themselves, not the artboard. And it might look similar, but it's a little bit different, okay? Because things aren't exactly centered in the middle. So I'm going to hit Command Z, undo. What if I want all of these guys to align to this particular object? Select all, okay? And click align to key object. And notice how one of them is highlighted, but that's not the object I want everything to align to. That's not the object that I want all of these other objects to be in allegiance to. I want it to be this one right here. So I just click and notice how that one becomes highlighted. And then I can come over here and say vertical align to center and watch this. Boom. Very, very useful stuff. Okay. And there are some other functions here to kind of mess around and play with. Distribute is very, very handy as well. But I'll leave it up to you guys to learning this software is very, very experiential. And so I might even be going through some things, and you might notice that I've already talked about this stuff, but it's okay for me to mention it 1, 2, 3 times because I'm really trying to reinforce these foundational lessons with you guys. Okay, so the next question, which do you prefer, working with the grid strictly or making objects graphics more organically, and why? And remember, I can come up here to view and I can engage snap to grid. But the problem is I don't see the grid right now. Actually, I have to hit Command parentheses so that it will show up. I can hit Command parentheses again so that it will go away. So I'm going to bring it back because that's useful for us to see right now. Notice how it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 inches wide. And then there are all these partitions in the middle, 1/8 of an inch, okay, 2/8 of an inch or 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 1 full inch. Design is very much about dimensions oftentimes. And so being able to kind of snap to a grid can be very, very useful. But let's say I want to create a perfect circle that is 1 by 1 inch. I can use snap to grid with the grid engaged to do that. So I've got the shape builder tool selected. Normally to create a perfect circle, I have to hold shift, but with snap to grid on, look at how this is now talking to the grid really beautifully. And so that is now a perfect circle, and I made that with snap to grid engaged, and you can see that the checkbox is there. So it is indeed engaged. And it's also useful to have the grid visible, which you can toggle on and off with command parentheses. Okay. I think we're at our last question, if I'm not sure. What is an anchor and why is it useful when modifying objects? Okay. So remember, most objects, if not all of them, are going to have anchor points. And so even a circle has anchor points. And so I can't see them right now because I have the black arrow tool selected, but I can actually come over here and I can select the direct selection tool, or I can hit the shortcut A. When that happens, notice how now these 4 anchor points are visible, and I can double click in there and drag them around. This is a really cool circumstance with the circle because not only are we seeing the anchor points, but we're also seeing the handles. So we can start dragging this stuff around. Notice how it's kind of glitchy right now, and that's why, because we still have snap to grid engaged. So all I have to do is deselect snap to grid. And now watch when I do this, it's a much more kind of fluid process. It really depends on the project and what you're doing. And so I'm constantly in my process turning snap to grid on and off because sometimes you want it and sometimes you don't. Okay, thanks guys. That's enough for now.